We got a nice vacation into short videos. All right. 415, intercepts of quadratics. So remember the horizontal intercepts, we usually think about them as x-intercepts, but it doesn't have to be x. The horizontal intercepts are when the output is 0, right? If I have some function, horizontal intercepts are these 3 points, right? When the function output is 0. A lot of times that's y equals 0, but it doesn't have to be. The vertical intercepts, we usually talk about them as y, are when the input is 0. Right? So if I have a function, the vertical intercept is where it crosses the vertical axis. That's going to be where the input is 0. We're not going to the left or the right. Here the output 0, we're not going up or down. We're on the axis. So there are 3 cases for how many horizontal intercepts a quadratic could have. Right? Our quadratic could look like this and have 2 intercepts. Our quadratic could look like this, bounce off, and only have 1 intercept. Or our quadratic could look like this and have none. All right. So those are the 2 kind of things that we'll see here. And each one ties into a certain case for the next video. Find the vertical and horizontal intercepts of the quadratic function. C of s is 3s squared plus 5s minus 2. Again, the vertical intercept is where the input is 0. Our input here is s. The horizontal intercept is when the output is 0. Output is the function value, c of s. So this first one, that's actually easier. The function, when s is 0, 3 times 0 squared plus 5 times 0. Oh, it's just -2. That was easy. The vertical intercept is at the point 0, -2. We could call it the c-intercept if we wanted to here. Our output is the letter c. The other one's going to be harder to find. So the horizontal intercept, I'm going to divide things over here. I'm going to need a lot of space. Is when the function value equals 0. That's when 0 is equal to 3s squared plus 5s minus 2. You can solve this in a variety of ways. The easiest way for us to solve it in this one is probably factoring. You may also want to use the quadratic formula, which is the next video. Really important to do some factoring review. It's going to make a lot of things easier. Factoring is never, well, there's a couple questions on it to help you review. Never 100% mandatory outside of that, but it's going to make your life so much easier if you know how to factor. So there are a couple of ways of factoring this. My preferred way of factoring this is what's called the AC method. But there's a lot of ways. I have some factoring resources for you in the module if you need some lessons or practice. AC method says we multiply the A value and the C value. When we do that, we get -6. We need 2 numbers that multiply to -6 to add up to that middle value of 5. So -6 times 1 multiplies to -6. Oh, but it adds up to -5. We want it to add up to +5. So these are our 2 numbers. What the AC method says to do is keep the first term the same, keep the last term the same, and rewrite 5s. 5s is 6s minus 1s. So we use that 6 and that -1 right there to split up that middle term. Once we split up the middle term, we can factor by grouping. Group the first 2, what can we factor out? A 3s. What are we left over when we factor out a 3s? We're left with an s on the first one and just a 6 on the second one. In our second group, what can we factor out? Just a -1. What we're left with is, oh gosh, what did I do? So I got all worried because when we factor out a -1, we're left with s plus 2. when you use the AC method, the things in the parentheses should always be the same. Because the 6 is wrong. You factor out a 3s, only left with 2. Right? 2 times 3s is 6s. So those parentheses match now, which is good. Because now we factor out, right? We look at this whole thing now. The first term has an s plus 2, and the second term has an s plus 2. So we take out an s plus 2 from both of them. What are we left with from this guy? Just 3s. What are we left with this guy? A minus 1. That's how we factor it. That's the AC method in a nutshell. There are other methods of factoring these trinomials with a coefficient, a leading coefficient that's not 1. This is my preferred method. It takes a little longer, but it's pretty easy once you get it. So we need to solve this. This is going to be true when the first piece is 0 and when the second piece equals 0. Now we just solve each one of these linear equations. Because if you have two things that multiply together and equal 0, either the first thing is 0 or the second thing is 0, or both. This first equation is when s is negative 2. The second equation is when 3s is equal to positive 1. That's going to be when s is 1/3. So these are our horizontal intercepts. An input of negative 2, an output of 0, and an input of 1/3, and again an output of 0. That's what our intercepts look like here. There we go. There are other ways of finding horizontal intercepts, one of which is the quadratic formula, which we'll do in the next video. It's a student favorite. Factoring and completing the square, I really like, but students tend to like the quadratic formula, although it's really easy to make mistakes on it with your calculator, so you will need calculator practice. I'll mention that in the next one. Bye-bye.